Hi there.
Okay, I know I'm supposed to start with our intro, but I want to just sing "Welcome back, welcome back." This is the welcome back theme. Welcome back for Mr. Cutter. Anyway,
Welcome back. Yeah, I wasn't here last
I know.
episode.
Okay, let me go back and do what I'm supposed to do before Mel tells me I'm out of a job. Anyway,
No, never.
welcome to Brave Space Live, a show about anti-oppression, communal healing. Every week we pick a hard-hitting topic and we jump right into the awkwardness, which we start off that way. We just do it. We go into it.
Yeah,
I'm
it.
I'm Tychelle. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, a trained clinical social worker, and all of those things. And here's my co-host.
Hello, I'm Mel. I'm an author, an activist, and a social ethicist. Here we are.
Yeah, so back to what we were saying. You're back. She was off for a week, going and doing things and seeing I don't know what, I can't remember, but she was going places and seeing people. So how was your time?
I was seeing a friend who I hadn't seen for like 10 years, had never met her wife, and we had like a lovely lobster dinner, and it was amazing. We had the best time just catching up, and so that was really, really special. So I apologize I missed it.
No apologies.
Yeah.
I had Rebecca here as my stand-in white lady.
Rebecca.
She was very happy to be there. She was like, she popped up on screen last night. I don't know if you had a chance to look at the beginning of the episode. She popped up on screen, and I was like, "You're not Mel." She's like, "No, just some other white lady." Good conversation about relationships and understanding. And one of the things that I had learned, and I'm this is the portion where I fill Mel in about what we kind of talked about last week. She talked about being an ex-Mormon and dating with the ideal of dating to get married. And funny enough, I had one of my neighbors was raised Mormon, and she ended up not getting married and never having children because she was always rebellious and never ever wanted it. So she's in her 60s and is like, I still don't want to get married. So just
good for her. I'd like to meet her.
Oh, she's awesome. She's really awesome. She has a dog named Jaja, like Jaja Gabor. She's awesome. But yeah, Rebecca was talking about her experience and like not wanting to date someone unless that person added more to her life than as it is because she likes her life.
Yeah, very cool. I'll have to go listen to it. That sounds wonderful.
I know, so good.
Yeah. This week we are talking about My Culture Is Not Your Costume. And I'm really excited to get into this because Halloween's coming up. And listen, I love Halloween so much. You know what I'm going to be this year?
What are you going to be this year?
Thank you for asking. I'm going to be.
You know what I'm gonna be? Thank you for asking me.
I'm so glad you're interested. I'm going to be Maleficent.
Oh, Maleficent.
Yes, with the horns. And I bought this like crow feather cowl, and I made this like creepy staff, and I'm going to look super evil, and I'm so excited. Evil / good
for you.
Well, Maleficent, it's like the new Maleficent.
I'm not upset with
the storyline.
Exactly, and I'm not upset with any Disney character because what you really find out is that most of the people that are evil just had some horrible things happen to them, which made them evil. It's a commentary on society, but you know.
Also, have you heard the commentary of like Disney villains almost always tend to embody some sort of queerness?
I have heard that lore, and they also tend to be women, which is a whole other commentary in itself. Why most of them are women, but women or people of color. But yes, I've heard a lot of the queer origin story stuff. Even
if it's an unconscious bias on the part of Disney, like I know Disney like tries to be as a company like very inclusive and very like pro LGBTQ, but it's very interesting how those unconscious bias creep into what we demonize and we consider the bad guys of society.
Well, I am not going to be anything for Halloween because I do not think about what Halloween, like I just haven't dressed up for a very, very long time. And I think the last time I was too old to really do Halloween, but I dressed up as a baby because I just wanted free candy. And then I just tried to get my husband to buy me free candy under the guise that we have to give candy to children. And he's like, there's like one child we see around us. Who are we? And I was like, we need a bag of candy. And I would literally probably just eat one piece a day. So No candy dark.
Wait, okay, let's back up to the point where you said you were too old for Halloween. What?
Oh yeah.
What?
So like I was okay. I say that not too old for
There's
Halloween, but
no
too old
such
to
thing.
go trick or treating.
Okay, yeah, there is a point.
Actually begging people door to door for candy and tricks and treats.
Yeah, when you're
So,
like
but I actually
17.
have never thought about. It wasn't until I worked in a college space that I ever thought that adults dressed up for Halloween because in Black families, most people tend to be some sort of religious, and there's like the. I remember having a sign, having seeing signs in my neighborhood that said "No Halloween, just Hallelujah," because
No, no, no.
well, so like my mom just never dressed up for Halloween, so I had no idea that like white people love dressing. And I know that people of color, I'm not just saying white people, but generally white people are like, I can't wait to figure out what I'm gonna be for Halloween, and they figure it out. Yeah, Hallelujah nights, as our producer saying, it's a big, it's wild to think that. But I just never thought about like adults being Halloween costumes. My favorite Halloween costumes are when people take like thought process to be something, and it's not just something like really easy. So like the best Halloween costume I ever remember, and we'll really get into the topic of culture in this as well, was these people who decided to be serial killers, and they were all they had a serial killer with them, and they all dressed up as different mascots from cereal boxes. And I loved like couple costumes where they're like, but not like just literal, but something different. So I love that, like, oh, you go as a nightstand, you're a one night stand, but you're like a nightstand as a side table, things like that.
Yeah, that's clever. Like the cleverness. Like I think it's oftentimes, you're. I think you either showcase like the skillfulness of your costume creation abilities and your ability to cosplay, or be clever and make people laugh. Like I think one of the best costumes I ever saw was these teenagers who dressed up like a door and they rang people's doorbells, and then people would open the door, and there would be a door, and then people would stand there for a minute, and then the people like whose house it was would be like, trick or treat, and they'd open the door and they'd be like, happy Halloween, and they would give them candy. So they're like
I
handing
love
candy
that. I
back.
love it.
It was cute.
There's just so many like cool things you can be if you really think about what you are and want to be for Halloween. So I do love that concept of it. I have thought, so I have less Halloween, but dressing up as is like these parties that people are having all over social media and TikTok. You get to see where you have a color party and everybody dresses brings everything in that color, or they'll be like, we're having a Beyonce party and you dress up as Beyonce in different iterations and things. So I like that kind of costume party. Halloween is just one I'm just never really sure about, and the reason that what we're talking about, at least in part what we're talking about today, is the reason why I'm just like, y'all better be careful. So
Yeah, yeah.
so when we talked to our producer and they talked to us about this episode, I really wanted to hear like how you grew up, your thoughts about Halloween and costumes and cultural appreciation, appropriation, and what that looks like. So I
Yeah.
wanted to hear definitely from you, and I'll share some stories as well.
Yes. So this is a topic that I've been thinking about a lot recently for a couple of reasons. So we're talking about costumes, like that can take many forms, and not just Halloween, right? Costumes in general, like donning the culture of someone else because you feel entitled to do that, or you think it's okay or funny, or you claim to not know better, or whatever it is. And I think that can also take form in like, especially spiritual spaces. So someone who's like, practices in the world of paganism, and kind of which tends to be a pretty white dominant because a lot of it comes from like the Celtic spiritual traditions, right, which are like from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Britain. So, and those are traditionally white places. So, but in these spaces, because of new age spirituality and the way it works, there is a lot of cultural appropriation of indigenous traditions, indigenous clothing, indigenous traditions, practices, language, not literal language, but like terms for things.
Mhm.
And a lot of it stems from, I mean, so it's hard because there's a deep, and I want to get into this in a minute, but I think for white people don't recognize, for a lot of us, there's a deep grief in the fact that we gave up our culture in order to become white. And we have and I think a lot of us experience an instinctual longing to have a form of culture, some things that we can do to mark occasions, to mark rituals, to mark change in our lives, to mark the wonder and sacredness of the world. But what we once had has been lost to history, uh, obliterated by colonial forces, or we've literally just abandoned it for the sake of becoming white and becoming capitalist. So there's a huge, like, I think primal loss there, that I think when a lot of people appropriate culture, they're not recognizing that that grief is underneath it, and they need to address that, because they're going to continue causing damage. White people are going to continue causing damage until they address that underlying cultural loss and cultural structure. So anyway, and I have a story to kind of go along with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone I grew up around, an adult I grew up around. Let's see, I don't. How do I say this? So this person had spent some time on a native
Some native land.
reservation, on a reservation, volunteering for a couple of summers. So knew the
Yep.
community.
I can already see where it's going. I volunteered with the less fortunate and the poor, so now
Yeah.
I am one of them.
Yeah, well, so they never claimed to be native, which is
Right,
good.
right, right.
Um, they did, however, watch in a specific type of indigenous dancing that
Mhm.
is very sacred to this tribe. I don't want to give details because I don't want to like lambast you. My point in telling this story is not to put people on blast or shame anybody, but to say like this is how this is how damaging ignorance can be in this arena, right? For white people who even might mean well or think that they're being respectful. So this person like watched this style of dancing that the indigenous people were doing, kind of memorized it, like taught themselves how to do it, I guess. Like I don't think was given necessarily permission by the tribe to do this type of dancing, because I think it's a very sacred type of dancing. And then um was brought in, but this is like so cringe, it's hard to say it. Was actually like hired or brought in by Boy Scout troops to come perform this indigenous style of dancing for Boy Scout events. And actually, this person wore a black wig and would give war cries as if they were indigenous. And I watched this first. I know your face. I know. I watched this firsthand happening at the time, and I was like, at the time I thought it was really cool. Oh, this person dances really well. I just like had no freaking clue about how damaging this was. And then years went past, and like I asked this person why they stopped doing it, and they go, oh well, someone complained, it's just not politically correct anymore.
Right.
Not really acknowledging the fact of what they were doing was harmful, not really getting it, but just like, oh, someone else kept me from having the fun that I wanted to have.
Mhm,
And it was
mhm.
like, it was so confusing to me, because this was somebody I looked up to, and I was like, but if you spend all this time with these native people, how could you not know that that would be hurtful for you to be a,
Right.
appropriating this and like pretending to be native or performing as if you're native, like and this is the thing that's really really important, I think, for white people to understand. Cultural traditions like this, like dancing, for example, are sacred. They are spiritual rights for these communities.
And not everybody even in that community is doing it.
Yeah. It would be like if like a Muslim person was like, hee, look at me, I'm doing communion. Look, it's the body of Jesus. Like, let's just toss it around in the air and play football with it and then eat it. Like, ha ha, isn't that funny? That would be deeply offensive, right? Like
Mhm.
deeply offensive. So when you're taking these traditions and you're stripping them of their culture, you're stripping of them of their language, you're stripping them of the people that develop them, and you're stripping them of their spirituality, you're turning it into a really, really distorted, ugly thing that it never was meant to be. And you're causing so much damage, not only to that practice, but I think to ourselves we cause damage when we do these things. So anyway, I've been talking for a while, so please feel free to
No,
jump
I
in.
mean, I think it's also like this form of low-level colonialism in that everything is open for taking,
Hmm.
and that I can do it the same way you do it because and I want to make a distinction too, because many tribes, groups, people of color invite people in to share. And that's great. That's what we call cultural appreciation, cultural exchange. But when you go, because I wasn't offended, or and I'm not going to be offended for another group of people. But what kind of gave me cringe was not that this person was on this native land, if they
Hmm.
were invited,
They were allowed to be
not
there.
that they, right, not that they were engaging. I'm very aware about like cultural tourism where people volunteer with groups of less needy. I have a lot. We have to have a whole conversation about that. So I'm wary of that.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't that it was not that you saw this dance and you learned it. They might You can go to cultural traditions and cultural events and they will want you to dance with them. They want to show you, they
In
want to
some
be
cases.
engaging, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
But really, I think where what crossed the line, just step my foot over the fucking line, is being um paid by other groups of
Yeah.
people to do that same dance. I think that
Yes.
is where the line, this is where, and we talked about this earlier as we were preparing for this episode, really thinking about what's the line of appreciation versus appropriation, right?
Mm.
So you can appreciate one, I mean, we'll go back into it a little bit deeper, but that's the appropriation. You are now becoming the group who is getting paid for, who is, because what if that cultural practice, and we talked about this in our museum episode, you can't just return it back to this group. What if that group of people would never do that dance for money?
Right, exactly, and oh my gosh, yeah, and here's a really interesting thing that I hope, like, especially white listeners take away from this, and the story that I told with the dancing and everything. I know this person who did this, and he thought that he deeply thought that he was dancing in a way that was respectful because he learned all the steps, and he thought that that was his way of, like, participating in that culture. However, if you are not commissioned, like, A, are you staying in relationship with the culture that you're using this practice? Are you in relationship with it? Have you been commissioned by this community of people? Like, for example, I have a friend who, a pagan friend who, um, when I first met her, she was like talking about a lot of native stuff, and I was like, "Oh no, this is going to be a mess." But I've since learned that she has such deep ties to a native tribe that she's been formally adopted through a ceremony as a relative of native people. She calls them aunt and uncle, and they call her kin. Like it's like a bonded ceremony that this particular tribe considers closer than blood kin, and she has been effectively adopted into this tribe. So she's white. She's like as white as I am, but she has a deep and ongoing relationship with this community, and she does her best to respect what are practices that she's been invited into and what she's not invited into. There's certain things that she's not invited into, and she respects those boundaries. So I think the terms here that I want to make sure to touch on are open practices versus closed practices. What are open practices? Like you said, practices that anybody is welcome to come participate in with certain boundaries, right? Versus closed practices that, like, you can't go in there. I'm sorry, white people. I know you really want to go in there. I know your curiosity is just burning inside you to go in there and, like, see what they're doing, but you're not allowed to go in there, and you
But
need to
also,
respect that.
so in that too, that I was thinking about, not just you can't be a part of it. We show you, you should not. Me showing you doesn't mean you now go back. Let's, like, okay, I go to an Indian wedding, India, and I'm talking Indian,
Yeah.
right? I want to make that distinction, because when I'm talking about people who we call Indian here, I would say Native or First Nations or something like that. So I want to make that distinction for folks. But I went to an Indian wedding. I was invited to wear a sari. I'm wearing the sari. That's like now me being like, I went to this Indian wedding. All of the people were open to that. It was great. And now I make saris. Like,
Yeah, and I
and I
sell them,
sell them for
and I
money.
benefit economically when and taking that money away from another indigenous
But I'm
or
purchasing my materials from Indian people. But I'm now making money. Like, and I think about that. But one of the things I also wanted to say to that is, not everything that Native or white or any cultural group is doing is for money. And I want white people, people of color, people who are not of any group, that they're any of these groups, any group, right? Because we'll talk about, Cinco de Mayo and black people dressing up in sombreros as well. But not every cultural practice is for money. And that is very a capitalistic way that we engage, in that everything should be commodified, and
yeah.
it's not. It's like, and this is a very small thing, but it always rings in my mind when I said to my husband as we were walking, like, I try to keep my own judgments in balance. And I saw someone in my neighborhood with a dream catcher in their window, and I was like, well, maybe they got it from a native, maybe they bought it from native people, maybe it's a native thing that was given. He was like, but they wouldn't hang it in their window of their dashboard. That's not how that works. And I was like, also true.
Oh, in
And
your
then also,
car?
not, yes, in the
Yeah.
car.
Mhm.
Another thing that happens, that people, because it's a dream catcher, like, are you sleeping while you're like,
No, you better not be. Yeah.
right. But one of the other things I want to think about too is how we engage with what is there, and when it's shared with us, do we should we now profit from it? Should we engage in
Yeah,
that way? And also, the other thing I wanted to, before I lose my train of thought, wanted to say too is that we also cannot make it seem as if, and this happens in America specifically, because when you come here you have to represent the entire group of people. So when we think about Latinx or Latina people, we think of them as one group, but there's distinct cultures inside of them. So like being from Colombia and being from Guatemala is not the
yeah,
same.
yeah,
Every native tribe is not, it's not like one giant tribe. They
yeah.
have different and distinct practices.
Hmm.
And a rain dance from one tribe is not the same in a different, like they're not the same. So
Yeah.
you can't be like, you can't just like, especially dressing up on Halloween in that one headdress is like, but do you even know what tribe that's from? Do you even know names of tribes? That kind of thing.
And also, like, feathers in many indigenous tribes, and I don't know a ton about this, so please, correct me if you know more about this or anyone who's listening. Feathers in many native tribes are not only sacred, but they have to be earned. So it's like it's not only offensive in this particular context. Is a really good example of like a feather headdress, for example. Not You're not just taking and try to appropriate from that culture, which is already disrespectful toward people who've been through a lot and experienced so much discrimination and turmoil and trauma, but you are taking something that's a symbol of sacredness and leadership and earning. I believe in many cultures, like, only the war chief wears a headdress that big, and you are presuming to be as important as somebody who has earned that and done so much in their community to earn that trust and earn that leadership. So yeah, the economics especially of it are really important, like who's making money from that. And I want to say this, like, I fully believe that supporting indigenous artists is a form of reparations in the best possible way. Like, a lot of indigenous people, especially living on reservations, like, they have very limited employment opportunities, and a lot of them support themselves through making jewelry and making dream catchers and things like that, making bags. And it is wonderful to support those artists and buy those things. If you like the way dream catchers look, great, go buy one from an indigenous community. But
But
make sure
learn about it.
make sure to
That's the
ask that community and learn about the proper use, the respectful use of those things, so you don't tarnish their gift of artistry in the world and their traditions. And I think it's really important to understand, like, what's your relationship? Are you actually trying to get to know this community, if that's possible? Sometimes communities don't really want to be that open to white people because they've been burned so many times, or anybody who's not in that community, not just white people, but they've been burned so many times trying to build those bridges, like you said, Tychelle, that that is almost like re-traumatizing to get to know,
Yeah,
people
there's a
outside
tribe
the
outside
community.
of, in I think off the coast, and I don't, I'm gonna get some of this wrong, but they don't want to be contacted by the outside world, because what happened is the two, I think a grandparent and a child were like taken aboard a ship and not seen for like months or weeks or something like that, and that was really hard for them. Like their family bonds were broken, and when they came back to learn the story, they said, okay, we're not going to engage with outsiders, so you can't actually go to this island. You could be arrested. I believe it's off the coast of India. You could be arrested, and people, this missionary bribed a fisherman to take him there. And he didn't go once, he went two or three times, and he was writing a journal about, like, he was writing, and he wanted to proselytize to them. So the first day they didn't want to harm him. They shot like arrows at his feet, and they have, like, people have shot things at them. They have, people don't, and people want to go to study them because they don't know a lot about them. But that's literally the opposite of the point. They're trying to make themselves a little insular because they don't trust the outside world, and
Yeah.
they get along or whatever. And this guy, he went. You can look up the story. I think his name is John Chow, I believe. And he went one day, he's keeping a journal about what happened in it. He even wrote in his journal, if you find my journal and I'm not alive, this is what I was doing. But
Hmm.
he went back and they did kill him.
Wow.
He went there illegally. They didn't want to like harm him, but they knew that his presence was harmful to them, and that was
Yeah.
that. like we can't be a part of everything. We don't need to know everything. We can't investigate and engage. We can't take from their like we are not allowed to take from everybody's culture the
Yeah.
way you see that and this is like
I remember that story. That was in the last like 10 years, right? That was more
yeah,
recent.
it was
And
2008 or 2000. I think it was 2008,
here's the
something like
added
that.
complexity of that story is that that tribe understood that they had been insular for so long that they didn't have immunity to a lot of diseases that people from outside the island. So literally the presence of one outsider could cause massive death to
Yeah.
many of the people on the island because they like a common cold or the common flu, like they didn't have natural immunity, which is also how the indigenous people of our country, you know, were basically
Turtle
unalived.
Island, I will say, is what
Turtle
they
Island.
called it
Thank you,
before.
Turtle Island. Yeah. So I think yeah, it goes back to this question of like, do we are we entitled to know everything and participate in everything and to be up in everybody's business all the time? Or are there certain spaces if someone sets a boundary, we need to say, in some cases, like, yeah, I will respect that boundary. I'm not entitled to
I
roll
mean,
in
and
and
I think about this so much when it comes to costuming, right? And I wanted to share a story with you, and I'll bring it to a little bit to Halloween because I know we'll talk a little bit about Halloween and just cultural appropriation in general. Is that I was working on a college campus, and there was a young girl who, a college student who, she was Latinx, like that was her background was white and Puerto Rican, and for Halloween, she dressed up as a native person, wore a headdress. I don't even say she dressed up as a native person because, like, honestly, she just had on a headdress. And she said, and I was had to, as the director at that point, I had to go and talk to her as well. And she was like, "Well, it's part of my culture because I'm Puerto Rican and I'm Taino. Like that's part of my culture." And I wanted to, and I looked, and I did say to her because, and I don't know if I was supposed to, but I did say to her, I feel like if you were really engaging with that, you would know that that's actually not okay because dressing up on Halloween as a native person when you don't present that anywhere else in the year is a problem. And she had her boyfriend dressed up like a cowboy. It was
no, 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 no,
it was
no.
cowboys and Indians. Like I was like,
Oh no.
so having that conversation with people, understanding that like Halloween is not the time for you to discover cultural inferences.
Yeah.
Halloween night drinking
Wear it to a ceremony, like wear it to a cultural event, you
that you're
know, like
invited
I
to,
don't
that's
that you're
given to
invited
you.
to, or like maybe you go to powwow or whatever. Like I think there's indigenous people from all over the world that go to powwow. Um, but like but also like I don't know if this person possibly realized that her doing this, her and her boyfriend doing this could like cause pain to somebody else for whom that imagery like has hurt their family, you know, and like why would you want to dress in something in Halloween that you know could potentially cause someone pain and harm? Like
I
I
mean, and
just don't understand.
the problem, the twist of that story is that she came. I had to talk to her because she came to me because somebody posted the culture is not my costume, a picture like
Mhm.
a sheet of paper with that saying because we posted them around the building.
Yeah.
Some somebody put it on her door, and she was like,
Yeah.
somebody is targeting me because I'm Latin. And I had to have a conversation with her, and I was like, how do I have this and like really engage with, and I don't know if she'll
Yeah.
ever, she learned at that because she was also what we deem as white passing, and
Yeah.
she engaged herself in, and I'm not saying that also white passing can be problematic in that looking a certain way with ethnic features becomes white, but
Yeah.
cowboys and Indians on Halloween is not you celebrating your culture. Like,
See, and I think that's come those words from you would come hit differently than words from a white person like me, like because you're a person of color. Like I feel like you have a little bit more freedom to say things like that. Whereas I don't think I would be able to broach that subject. But I mean, I would have a very
I
difficult
mean,
time with that
it depends
conversation.
because she is half white, she's part white, and
Yeah.
having those conversations is different. Sometimes people look at me and I'm having these conversations and they're just saying things like, "Oh, well, of course you're going to say that because you're black. Like, of course you just always want everybody to feel bad about themselves." And I'm like, I would really rather you not feel bad about yourself by you taking responsibility for who you are and what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I say that to say it too when we talk about whiteness and white people and having this conversation. People of color, you are not exempt. There are I've been to a bar on Cinco de Mayo, which is a really strange holiday. Everybody thinks that anything is somebody's Independence Day. They're like, yeah, this is Jewish Christmas, is Hanukkah, and Mexican Independence Day, and we're like, no, that's not it. But people dressed up in sombreros, and and that's not how these work. These holidays, these whatever, who's celebrating them, who is like, not all Latinx people celebrate Cinco de Mayo. There's, certain cultures that do, a lot do not. So when we're really thinking about this, we're none of us are exempt, but we still have to understand what it is. And I especially think when it comes to this the conversation, I hear more white people say, well, how do we know what's appreciation? How do we know what's appreciation? I feel like if you have to ask, because the thing about appreciation is I can appreciate a lot of things from afar, but even in our museum episode, as we learned,
Mhm.
what does that mean to just appreciate and walk around being like, oh, I love this, but what are we doing with it? How are we engaging with it? What are we learning about it, right? Because appreciation for anything takes some knowledge and some
Yeah.
learning and some engagement. And appropriation is this thought process that I learned about this and I can own it. I
Yeah.
learned about this and profit from it.
Yeah. One is about ownership and like domination and control, and the other one is about relationship and wonder and recognizing someone's dignity. Like, it's when you're really in relationships with someone, you're going to ask them like, "Hey, how should I relate to you? How
What
can
does
I
this mean to
what
you,
does
right?
this mean to you? What's the significance of it? How can people who are not part of your culture engage respectfully? How can I show you respect so that we can have a good relationship?" Right? So we
Okay,
can
so
have a
and I
healthy
want
relationship.
to share this in this way. So I do I created a workshop on psychological safety and I facilitate that workshop pretty often. And we talk about this whole thing about appreciation and conversation. And one of the things that we say that can help build psychological safety is engage with curiosity.
Yeah.
But I want to make the distinction that engage with curiosity does not mean go berate a person with questions to be your Google.
Yeah.
And and so even some of the questions that you just asked, Mel, if you know a person, you don't have to ask because they've now shared with you why some of the things that they are important. And it feels less invasive if you know a person to ask them. Could you imagine me walking up to you and be like, so they as a pronoun, like, what does that mean? What's your journey about that? How'd you come to that? I don't understand it. And like, but knowing you, I didn't have to really have a deep conversation and asking because as I got to know you, a lot of our conversations inform pronouns and things like that because we can have
Yeah.
conversation. And that's what it really means. And this is another thing I say to people about allyship. Allyship sounds like friendship, so people love it, especially white people that eat it up. They're like, I'm an ally. I'm an ally. Like this now, it's now their identity. I identify as an ally. I'm like, no, that's also like ally getting their own flag. Nah, I'm not. I don't love it so much,
That's a
but
thing? What?
yeah, there's an ally flag. I'm like because
No.
we had to have our own flag for it. Like, okay.
Wait, what?
But for allyship, and I tell people like to start with allyship because it's like a feel good rom com wrapped up at the end of 30 minutes. It just, oh, I love this. No, it's a, I say rom com. It's like a sitcom where everybody hugs at the end of the show and the problem is over and the next episode is about them going to Disney World, whatever. But that's
Yeah,
what allyship a lot of people
you
feels like.
you get to be in like allyship, like in a performative way. Like you get to be in proximity to the positive work of social justice without actually being in a relationship, without actually doing the deep work, without actually you're still othering people. You're still othering people. You're
Right.
still treating people like a commodity that you just get to consume and then walk away. Like you're not actually in community
One
with
of
them.
our listeners said it's a participation trophy. Oh, we love trophies. Anybody who even engages with with any group that's marginalized in any way, we're like, but do I get a gold star for being here
The
for
word you
caring?
use is cookie. I've heard you say that in the past.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get a
You want a
cookie.
cookie?
Good
Yeah,
job.
culturally that's a thing that we say. You'd be like, oh, I did this good thing. You're like, what, you want a fucking cookie? Like that's what you're supposed to do. But it's
Yeah.
like, so this process of this appreciation and appropriation thing is that you have to be patted on the back for something or you
Yeah.
get something in allyship. And the way that comes up often is that people say they're an ally. They wear a badge. That's the thing. But like I always tell people, allyship is 6 steps in.
Yeah.
Like that means I'm engaging with this community. I'm a part.
Yeah.
I understand understand this community holds me accountable
Mhm.
and responsible for the things I say, and I don't run away like a puppy with my tail between my legs every time somebody corrects me or engages me with feedback, right?
I
So
work to earn trust, I educate myself. Like, yeah, here's an example too, like, you used the question about, so first of all, if you ask me about the "they" pronoun, I
she
would
drank a
love,
seltzer.
excuse me, I just burped, I apologize, it's so
No, nobody heard
awkward.
it.
Glad I
I
didn't
just
do
put
that
you on
during
the
like a
spot.
really, like, heavy emotional moment. I'm so emotional. If you asked me that, I would actually love to answer those questions, like, I would love to talk to you about that, but 2 reasons. A, I already know you care about me because we have a relationship, we have a friendship, so it's in the context of that deeper relationship, and I say relationship a lot because I don't think a lot of white people really understand relationships and friendships and what it really means, and we've talked about this on this show. Our very first episode, right, was, like, friendships between Black and white women and what it means to actually be in relationship with people. Um, but the other thing is, like, for me personally, the pronoun issue doesn't have a lot of pain or baggage or trauma as much as it does for other people. I'm not a trans person. I don't identify as trans. Haven't been, necessarily persecuted for this. There haven't been really any consequences for me changing my pronouns. If there had been, I might feel differently about it. But it's like, so the difference is, like, what if I walked up to you, Tychelle, and was like, "Hey, your hair is different. Like, how do you do your hair? Where do you go? How long does it take? How much does it cost? What's the history of your hair? Like, why don't you educate me on every single thing about your hair?" And, like, I could Google that, and, like you said, I could turn you into human Google, and that wouldn't be respectful because I'm, like, literally taking your precious time on this earth to explain things to me that I could just go YouTube and teach myself. I could learn anything I wanted to learn about
Right.
black hair.
And then you, and if we, again, if we had a relationship and you asked me, oh, how long does that take? I wouldn't be offended. But I actually had a conversation with somebody recently and they were like, there people live with this assumed positive intent. I was like, but that just puts so much emotional labor on the marginalized folks to like always be like, take a hit and be like, I'm going to teach you now. It's like, that's not the job of people to do when these things are out there because there's lots of work to get into and do. And when we're thinking about this, when I'm going back to appropriation and appreciation, it's just like, what does appreciation actually mean to you, right? Ask the question of yourself before you ask it of someone else, because usually it's used as a defense. Well, like, how can we culturally exchange? Also, white people, what y'all giving up? Like, what is the culture that you're sharing with us for us to share with you all?
Trolls.
Because we out here like, come on, learn. And then, we are very well. I'm going to speak for me. I'm going to speak for Black people for a second, but not all, because I know we're not all the same. But we out here like, come be a part of my culture. Come learn about it. Like every hood had, and I grew up in the hood. I grew up in an inner city, as they say. Has a white guy who lives there, who is a part of the culture. Who now we may tell him he can't say the N word, but back in the '90s it was fine. The one in my neighborhood was White Mike, like that was him. But if he went out to his white friends if he went out to white people he knew, and I didn't know any of them, would it be appropriate for him to act in the way that he does? But and Martin Luther King famously said that I feel like I've integrated my people into a burning house. And we're such a welcome, most of us are such a welcome. He said that was in his letters from a Birmingham jail. Most of us are such welcoming people that we want to exchange. We want to, but that does not mean you get to hold on and take. There was a comedian recently. I follow him. I follow a couple of comedy pages, and this this guy talked about being a white people appropriating native land. He was like, we went to the native people and like, whose land is this? And they were like, whose land? It's the land we all live and care for it and care for. He's like, it's nobody's. He's like, so it's nobody's land. He's like, no, it's nobody's land. Oh, it's nobody's land.
Now
How
it's
about we just say
mine.
it's white people's land? And he's
Yeah.
like, that we invented. Let's say we invented credit and all but he's white, and saying that is like white people invented credit. So we have to really think about how we engage with things and what we take from it,
Yeah.
because you can't live in we should not live in a realm of take and
Mhm.
use in other ways. Because if you went back to that culture and said, hey, I opened up my own sorry store, literally half of Shark Tank is people going to a different country, learning how to do something and bringing it back as their own,
And,
like
like,
literally all like
Columbusing it.
like
Yeah.
I'm talking like Belgian waffles. Like people are like, "Oh yeah, we went to this country and we learned how to make these waffles, so we opened up a store. I went to this country and they taught me how to bead, so I opened up a beading manufacturer, and now those people are buying their beads from me." And I'm like, "What?
What?
You can't. Everything is not to be commodified and
Consume.
consumeristic."
Yes. Yeah. And also, like, it's not about you. Like, okay, so going back to the hair example, for like, so sometimes when you change your hair, I go, wow, that looks really nice. I love your hair, right? But I need to remember that you're not doing your hair for me. Like, you're doing
Right.
your hair because you like it. And even if I didn't like it, that wouldn't matter because it's your hair and you're doing it the way you like.
Listen, I don't
It
even
has
care if my
nothing to do
husband
with
don't like my hair. Like we married, but I will say too in that
yeah, it's
you
nothing to
would
like sorry, just to
no
finish
good,
this, so sorry to interrupt, but like the
good.
the proximity to whiteness, like it sometimes white people don't need to be involved. It doesn't need to be in relation to white people. Things need to be allowed to be on their own without always constantly being in relation to whiteness and how there's proximity to whiteness, right? Like that would be so frustrating if you constant I mean, as a woman, I understand that like always have to be in proximity to maleness in a male dominant society. Like I always have to think about how I relate to the norm. So that was my
If
thought.
we're centering when we're
Yeah.
centering things like that, and I think about this, and this is when we really talk about relationship, and not a fine a relationship can't be this finite thing. It can't be that I went to this reservation, I went to this country, and I was there for 6 months, and now I know all there is to know because that country, that native land may have evolved and changed from the time that you went there, and you don't even know what's going on there now if you're not in a constant relationship. And Eduardo Bonilla Silva, and I'll get back to the hair example in a second, but Eduardo Bonilla Silva, in his book Racism Without Races, talks about how white people will talk about their relationships with people of color as like, that's my best friend, but it'll be like the person that they used to work with 10 years ago and haven't talked to since that time.
Yeah. White
And like
people.
they would be dumbfounded. It'd be like, so yeah, my college roommate was black and she taught me all these things. He taught me all these things. They taught me all these things. I remember to now when I say he and she, I remember to also add a they because it's trying to be and wanting to be more expansive in that. Not I
Yay.
don't need a cookie. I'm just saying. Um, because people always say he or she, and I'm like he, she, or they. But when we're thinking about what that is, like just this thought. Now I lost my train of thought. In the in his book, they these finite relationships where none of those people exist in their world, in their life anymore at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
They're still using that as a proximity, and this is why. And I will tell you. So let me go back to the hair story, and then let me put this off on the side is that because of when we talk about relationships and the relationship that we have, Mel would know and does know that as I get my hair done, I'm thinking 3 hairstyles from now. I'm not just thinking about, I'm thinking, all right, when I take these braids out, I'm going to do this. And the next thing I'm going to do is that. So I'm planning 3 hairstyles ahead anyway. So you're going to know when you come and see me, like, oh, yeah, my next hairstyle, I'm going to do crochet or whatever. And you'll be like, oh, yeah, Tychelle, you said you were going to do crochet. I like the way that looks on you, right? So that thought process. So back to this.
That's appreciation. Like I'm allowed to say, I'm allowed to appreciate the way you look and the things that you do and celebrate you for who you
And
are because you're
I'm going to
amazing.
shift your language there a little bit. Not
Yeah.
allowed, invited,
Thank you.
and
Yes.
not like a
Thank
cookout,
you. No,
but invited. Right?
that's a great
Because I
qualification.
can't grant you, and I also can't grant you the access to now go ask every other black girl you meet about her hair. Because here's
Right.
the thing: when you do that, it'd be like I literally had a supervisor at a job say to me, and I might have told this story before already, but she at a job, and it was my first week on this job, first week, and she came up to me and said, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" And she thought she
Oh,
thought she was
no.
she thought she was great for having asked without doing it. She was like, I asked, right? But she said, oh, can I touch your hair? And I said, no. Because it was like my knee jerk reaction to be like, no. And she's
Oh.
my boss. Actually, she's my boss's boss.
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
no. And she was like, well, Gloria, sorry, Gloria, hopefully you're listening to this. She goes, well, Gloria lets me touch her hair. And my response was, well, you should touch Gloria's hair.
But, like,
Well,
honestly, the fact that you had to do that, like, that must have taken so much courage because, like, you don't know if that's going to impact your job, your employment. Like you have a
And
lot to
this is
lose in
not
that
the
scenario.
first time a person at my
Yeah.
job touched my hair, asked to touch my hair. I told the story earlier today when I was facilitating, in that people every year, people I get asked, I get touched somehow, and they were like, "Is it like when when someone touches a pregnant woman's belly?" I said, "Yes, but also Black women can be pregnant, so like that happens to us and this." Right. So, but part of that in being that from that story that I wanted to pull out was, if Gloria lets you touch her hair, which I cannot tell Gloria she shouldn't. The one thing I would tell Gloria is, when you let white people touch your hair, when you let Asian people touch your hair, when you let anybody who's not us, when you let anybody touch your hair, let them know when they walk away from you that not everybody's going to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? Not everybody's going to love that. Right? But if my thing for that leader, and I would hope that she's listening because we are friends on Facebook, is that, and it's been 7 years since that happened. If Gloria lets you touch her hair, why do you need to touch mine? Like,
It's I've it's so weird. It's so weird to ask people to touch people's hair because
well,
like
here's the thing. If
you,
Gloria lets you touch her hair, why do you then need to touch mine too?
it's
Somebody already
weird.
let you do it.
Yeah.
So, and I can't tell Gloria that she can't let people do it, but think about the why. People don't spend enough time on, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to know this? What does that even
And why do
mean?
I need to? Why do I have a compulsion? And I think this goes back to like whiteness needs to exert itself over everything and everyone around it.
Well, that's because that's what whiteness is. And when we say whiteness, we've said
We're not
this to
talking
you
about
all
all white
before. We're
people.
not talking about white people. We're talking about white culture, and white culture literally is built on racism, right? And I would say, if you are listening to this, hopefully you've listened to other episodes. If not, they're archived in so many different places. But when we now I'm belching. When you think about that, like, why do you need to go and touch people's hair? And one of the
Yeah.
things that I'm very intentional about, and I said this to my husband recently, is that I know somewhere somebody is saying Tychelle is my Black friend, or they're
Mm.
saying they have a Black friend and they're thinking about me.
Yeah.
And how I work in that thought process, and I know this is not what I'm telling other people of color to do, but I am a DEI practitioner, is I know that when you leave me as a person, you're going to know that it's not okay to do that. You're gonna know that you shouldn't. Hey, if Mel, if you ask me, could you touch my hair, and I oblige that, I'm gonna let you know.
Yeah.
Not everybody's gonna respond to you that way. You can't. You say, and that's because that's what my job is. But I also can't control that, because I had a meeting with a lady at work one day. We had 2 meetings together, two, and she said, "Well, Tychelle, we're friends," and I was like, "We had 2 meetings.
Yeah.
How are we friends?" Like, that
Yeah.
term is used so loosely, and
It
like,
is. Yeah.
I'm reevaluating friendships day in and day out, and I'm talking about the ones I've had for 10, 20, 30 years. Do they serve me? Are we close enough? Do we engage with each other? Are we in a relationship? Do we have psychological safety between us in that relationship?
So,
So,
okay, so this is like putting a kind of a new thought in my head. What if we
okay.
could define whiteness in a sense of like, and I don't, sorry, I keep coming back to whiteness, but it's like, I think most of the people who are doing stuff like wearing culture as costumes are white people doing this. I think so. It's like, uh,
The
but
chances are it's cloudy with a chance of meatballs. Like, it's a little
yeah,
bit, not
yeah.
all, not all, and there are
Cultural
90 white people
appropriation. Yeah.
who understand that it's
I
not a
think,
thing.
okay, so let's say it this way. I think people who are prone or likely to cultural appropriate, like maybe there's a sense in which they're just wearing costume after costume, like putting on the costume of friendship, putting on the costume of like trying to be fair and equitable, putting in the costume of, but like if you're trying to live authentically in a vulnerable, real human connection way, you're going to try to exercise empathy that connects you with people around you, right? So like I might not know that, for example, hair for Black women is often, not always, but often a very sensitive topic. But the fact that how what am I trying to say? I'm starting to grapple for words, which I think is like a good sign
But
that
one
you're
of the things
learning and growing.
and
But
maybe I can aid you here, is that
yeah, please.
after I share with you that, after you learn it, what are you doing with that information? Have you
Right.
investigated it more? Because it's giving I'm cosplaying an ally.
Yes,
It's giving
yes. Stop
cosplay.
cosplaying stuff. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was trying to go with this. Like, it's like I think for a lot of white folks, like or anybody who does this stuff, like, oh, I didn't know hair was a sensitive subject. I didn't know this dance was a sensitive subject. I didn't know
Let me
that
tell
going on a
you.
reservation without being invited was a sensitive. I just didn't know, and I didn't take
Also,
the time to think about it because I
I'm gonna
haven't had to think about it.
I'm not going to shift your language. I'm going to add to your language reservation and native, just native land as well,
Native land.
right?
Yeah,
Because reservations, some are reservations, some is just sacred native land.
yeah,
In that, I'm just adding to that for you and for our other listeners and
yeah,
viewers. My other thought process about that is that it infuriates the fuck out of people of color and marginalized groups when people are just constantly, and more often white, not all, are constantly surprised. Resma Minikim said in a talk of his, I don't keep around friends who are constantly surprised that oppression happens.
yeah,
Because that's so frustrating for us. Oh my God, I had no idea. Where have you been?
yeah,
And I'm not saying you have to know the ins and outs. So maybe you didn't think about black hair. That's okay. But there's legislation. And it's the same thing as the privilege of not knowing is such a wondrous, mystical, and sometimes we just wish we could not know as well. I wish I
mhm,
didn't know about the Crown Act. I wish I didn't have to think about it. But like, I'm not saying you should know everything, but I cannot be around a person who's constantly mystified and surprised that oppression is a thing in 2022. Like, okay, what were you doing for the last 200 years or whatever, however long you've actually been here, 30 years, 40 years? I just that kind of it is just that fanciful nature of just not being oblivious is a privilege.
yeah. It is
It is,
absolutely a
and
privilege to
all
live
of us
in
have those,
La La
right?
Land. Yeah,
First time somebody said to me that we don't really actually have marriage equality in this country, I was like, what do you mean? They were like, when you are a disabled person and you get married, your benefits get taken away. That's not marriage equality. And I was
yeah.
like, damn, that's like,
And that
like
information changes you. Like, you have to interact in the world differently if you really take that seriously and, like, actually allow yourself to be educated and moved by that, moved by it.
that's the thing. That's the thing. I will tell you, I went to a movie. I went to go see Moonlight in theaters years ago when it came out. And we came out of the theater. It was me, my husband, our producer Ben, and his friend. No, my husband, my husband's friend, me and Ben. And I was so frustrated by that movie. And I will still tell you, I'm not a fan of the movie, and not because I don't think that it was a good. It's because I think that it became poverty porn and like homophobia, not homophobia porn, not like gay porn, but it became like this thing where people go, oh, I was so
So sorry.
moved. You're fine. I thought it was my dog. I heard it in my ear. No, you're fine.
Oh, I'm so
It
sorry. Give
becomes
me a
this
sec.
thing where people feel um where people feel, they say they feel moved. And then my next question is, moved to do what? I felt the same way after I saw Lion, the movie about the Indian person who was trying to find his family in Calcutta. I believe it was Calcutta with Nicole Kidman, which is another white savior movie. But what are you moved to do? What are you moved to? What has changed in you? How are you going to engage differently? What does that actually look like? So I really want to think about that for folks who say that they're moved by something. How is it going to change you for a period of time? And how I will tell you, I took a class in, and I was saying, actually share this story with somebody just the other day. I took a class in undergrad, and the professor said to me, it was a white woman. The professor said to me, said to our class, it was 7 weeks, and um it was a 7 week summer class, and she said this I'm losing my train of thought. She said, this class is going to change the way you look at life. So I'm in this 7 week summer class, and my teacher, who's a white woman, says, this class is going to change the way you look at life. I'm like, you're talking big shit for a 7 week class in any summer class. But then she talked about, we read narratives and we read all of these things. And I say I was moved and I was changed. And I can still vividly remember things about that class that I took because it changed me as a person fundamentally.
Right.
It helped me grow as a person fundamentally. I learned that we shouldn't call people of color, black people in this instance, slaves, that we should be calling them enslaved, because enslavement is a condition, whereas slave is a title to who they are, is
Identity.
personifying them.
Yeah.
So I think about that all of the time and how I engage. So if you're saying that you're moved by something, what are you moved to do?
And
What are
how are
you
you
moved?
moved to change your relationship to this community?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think about what that looks like. But we do want to, as we are winding down here, talk a little bit about Halloween.
Yeah.
This is our PSA.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you go first.
No, go for it. So go ahead.
This is our PSA to say you can be your favorite character. You
Hmm.
don't need to put on makeup to make them yourself look like them. You can be Viola Davis in The Woman King, I guess. I don't know. I'm not gonna say you can or can't, whatever. But you can be, but don't put on blackface.
Yeah. Don't
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 put on
don't change your skin tone or your skin color.
right.
Period. Just don't do that.
White people don't put on whiteface. That doesn't happen. It
And
happens
if you
very,
don't know
very rare.
why, look up the history of minstrel shows.
Hmm.
Okay, if
Hmm.
you don't know why.
And we listen. We'll have to do a
We
whole
did it.
episode of this. But I've heard
We did an
somebody say
episode on
we did.
yeah.
We did talk.
Yeah.
I know we talked about it because I remember having this. I'm like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
blanking one time. That's people said
Right.
that Mickey Mouse is a minstrel character, and I'm like, oh,
Oh
but that's
no.
a whole. So we have that whole history. But
Yeah.
in general, um, you don't have to change the color of your skin to be a Halloween character.
Yeah.
And also, what about that Halloween character is fun for you? The thing about Halloween is supposed to be this fanciful thing,
Yeah.
right? So being a geisha, being a native person
Yeah.
is not a fanciful thing. And if it's fanciful for you and these are real people, why? Right? So I really want people to investigate that. Be creative with your costuming, but you do not need to dress up as a real person unless you're going as your mom, which is always funny, whatever. Um, make fun of your own groups of people. We love comedy for that reason. Make fun of people that are in your culture if that's what you're gonna do. But I would say stay away from being people, because especially being cultures that you have and know nothing about. I think that's
Yeah.
really, really important. That's my PSA. Every year on October 30, no, that's 31st, November 1st, somebody says they had no idea that they shouldn't do it
If you're
every
not
year.
and if you're not sure, go find a person representative of that culture and maybe check with them. And if you feel weird about asking that question, you probably shouldn't do it. Just save yourself the trouble. Be something else. Be a
Google, should
cereal.
I
Google it.
dress up
Get
as,
on Reddit.
and you're
Yeah.
like,
Get on TikTok, get on Reddit. Yeah. They'll tell you. And if when in doubt, do something else. Be creative and be clever in a different way. Like there are so many options. Be a door. Hand out candy. Like do, you know,
First of all, that's a genius costume for
I
people to
know.
open. If I was there, I think what I would love, and as soon as you said it, I was like, oh my God, being a door, and then you knock on somebody's door, and then you leave your door closed, and you open your door and yell at somebody and be like, why are you at my door? It would be so fun.
That's great, right? That's
And
clever. Like,
I want to say that because it doesn't need to be this somber thought process. I know that we
yeah.
talked a lot and we got a little bit heavy. It was a little bit less like fanciful and fun, but like Halloween can
Sorry.
be that. And no, but I'm saying, but it doesn't have to be this like dreadful thing. You can do it. You can engage in it. You're not going to get any candy from my house because my husband wouldn't let me buy any. But also, okay, Mel, I want to hear what you have to say because I really want to talk about in the next couple of minutes this movie that I've watched for Halloween and share a little bit about it talking about spoilers. Just I'll say that. But
Okay.
go ahead. I want to hear from
Okay.
you.
Yeah. So my wrap up thought is this. Going back to just to kind of put an end cap on that conversation around like appropriating indigenous stuff, because I feel like that's the stuff that's some of the most egregious appropriation that I see. There's all kinds of appropriation. There's digital blackface and speaking in AAVE, and there's wearing sombreros, pretending to be geishas. Like pick your poison. It's out there. But I think the indigenous stuff has just been really, really on my mind lately. Because I recently went to my first powwow, and just so everyone knows, a lot of people don't know this, they're open to the public. However, there are often I wouldn't say often, always very strict codes of etiquette. And if you go on the website for these events, they'll give you a whole list of things that you should do and not do. They'll tell you before you get there. Like if you're white, if you're not native, please don't dance. Please don't wear certain things. Please sit here. Please stand when you're asked to stand. Please be modest. A lot of them like wear, put a covering over your shoulders. Don't show up, in showing a lot of skin. So it is kind of amazing. Like if you actually like take the time to look for instructions on how to appreciate instead of appropriate, there are literally instructions for this written.
But make sure it comes from that group of people and not your friend just telling you.
Exactly. But like if you do a little bit of Googling, so like I was able to go, I was invited as a member of the public to go to a powwow and watch people dance, and do spiritual dancing and be there and be present respectfully.
So
It
enriching.
was amazing. It was beautiful.
You
But
don't have to take anything. It's just
and
so
I
enriching.
and I didn't have to pretend to participate. I was invited there as a guest, right? Like that I'm invited in, but I'm not in. I'm recognizing that I'm on the outskirts, but I still was able to appreciate this from a cultural perspective and see how beautiful it was. And this is a really cool thing. When they started the grand entry, there were this is like a kind of a little bit of a woo-woo moment, but I was blown away by this. When they started the grand entry, there were 3 hawks that arose out from the horizon and like flew straight over the circle where they were dancing, just soaring. Like it was beautiful. It was like someone had summoned them. I mean, it was like I was looking around going, wow, this is an amazing experience, but being really careful to understand that like this is not my culture. I'm here as a guest and I must show respect, or I need to escort myself out if I can't be respectful in this. So
You made me think of two. You gave me 2 images, and I said this to someone, and I try to make sure I remember to say this about to 2 people. I tell stories to kind of illustrate points so people can really find themselves in it. I'm a storyteller.
you
That's
are.
my brand of that's my brand of therapy, motivational interviewing, and storytelling, and narrative storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when you were talking about this experience that you had, it made me think of 2 things. I've gone to I'm not Catholic, but I've gone to Catholic churches. Could you imagine if I went to a Catholic church and was like, this standing up and sitting down is too much. I'm actually not going to do it. I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm not going to do what you asked me to do as you have invited me into this space.
Yeah.
Right. But the other that you said about being a guest, imagine someone, and I want people to do this and take this with them. You invite someone into your home to stay overnight, and they just started leaving with your shit. Like they're just like,
Yeah.
and then you see it, and then
Yes.
you look at them, and you're like, where's Jimmy? And Jimmy is selling your shit on eBay.
Yeah. Yes. That's a perfect analogy. He's like selling your grandmother's china. Like he took it
That's
out
what
of
he
the
took it.
hut. He was there as a guest. He took it out of the hutch, grandmother's china, without asking, left, and then was profiting from it. That's an exact perfect analogy.
It's ridiculous because I once had someone I gave someone something, and then they turned around and sold it, and I was like, and they were like, "Oh, I'll take it. That sounds great. I love it." And then they sold it, and they didn't understand why I was upset by that. But they were like, "But you gave it to me, so why can't I sell it?" And I said, "I gave it to you because I thought you wanted it.
Yeah.
You wanted it. If I wanted to sell it and make a profit, I would do that. But I also had to realize I had to let it go because I
Yeah.
did give it to them. But
Something about it feels
why
really
turn around
easy.
and sell it? Because I could have. I actually am a person who does not like reselling my clothing. I'd much rather give it away. I either want to give it away directly to people who can use it, right? Who
Yeah.
may be less privileged in this amount of privilege that I have, or to friends. I want to see it put to use. I want you to be joyful and get it. I don't resell clothes. I've done it like once or twice, but I never liked it. But
It sounds like that has like a really deep personal meaning for you.
no, and for me,
Yeah.
for me it was I just like to give it so people can enjoy it, especially if
Yeah.
if you can do it. But imagine you invite I'm gonna come stay over Mel's house, even in I'm a passerby, right? Like a lot of people do this. They're like, oh, so and so's in town. I know so and so there. She can stay with this person. And
Yeah.
you invite me into your home. You feed me dinner, whatever, and then I start leaving with your shit,
Yeah.
and I'm
I would be
selling
real
it.
mad about that.
Or I give you a gift and you sell it. And
Or
that's not what it was for.
or also like, but like people had been coming and stealing my shit for 400 years. Like, and like,
I
and
invited
you
you
don't,
in this time. Yeah, you
yeah.
can come
And like,
sell my. Wow.
Yeah, and then like to be like, oh well, maybe Tychelle's different. Maybe she won't steal my shit. Maybe she actually is my friend and she actually does care about me. And nope, she's just like all the rest of them. Like she's, like how many times does that have to happen to like break your faith in humanity?
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted, so I just thought that was a really good analogy for
Yeah, it's a
storytelling. So
perfect
see
analogy.
themselves in it. I feel like we talk a lot about when we talk about social justice. There's so many ways to draw analogies to a house. It's so funny
Yeah.
to a house and all of those things. But I want to end on a spoiler alert. Spoiler in five, four,
Wait, spoiler
three.
for what though? It's to give people a
Talk about Hocus Pocus just a little bit.
the
Have you
new one?
watched it yet? Yes.
No, I haven't
Have you
seen the
watched
new
it?
one yet.
Okay,
Okay,
so I
so
won't give you too many spoilers, but if
okay.
you are a person who hates spoilers, and I am not, you could tell me the entire
You
movie.
wait, what?
You can
Who
tell me the entire movie, and I still I
has
want to watch it even more. I love trailers. I love spoilers, and people are like, "You like?" I spoiled something for somebody once, and they started yelling. They were like angry with me. I will read the entire Wikipedia page. Usually, I will say I'm a
spoilers?
sitcom person, so movie spoiling doesn't bother me. But spoiling, like I was watching a new show the other day, and I didn't want to know who the winner. It was a competition show, and I was like, I can't look at any social media because if I do, I'm going to know who this winner is anyway. So I
Mm.
try not to spoil people, and so I won't give too many spoilers. Hopefully, it'll just make you want to go see Hocus Pocus 2. Now, there have been like some criticisms that the plot is just not too dynamic, but who cares? It's 29 years later.
It's
29 years later, Bette
amazing.
Midler is 75.
She's still
Kat,
incredible.
Kathy the Jimmy is 65, 64, and Sarah Jessica Parker is 53, 54, something like that. They're in those age ranges. And they did this movie when they were in their 30s, 40s, and 50s or whatever, or 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's 29 years later.
I
They
love
all
this.
and it's just as amazing and even more inclusive than it was back then and dynamic. And there's this one scene where they go into a Walgreens because they've never been into they don't know what this is because even 30 years ago there weren't that many and they didn't show any in the movie and they they eat children's souls because that's the whole premise of being these which is on Hocus Pocus specifically. And they do it's a sequel and a prequel because they talk about why these things happen. It kind of talks about how witches are not a bad thing, but they were trying to make somebody get married and they didn't want to do that and they were cast out from their community. So it's a really interesting in that way. And they had a 12-year-old play these roles. But they go into this Walgreens and they're supposed to eat children's souls and they look at this cream on the shelf that says anti-aging and they think that it has children's souls in it. So they're just pouring like retinol in their mouth. So it's funny. But the movie itself is just such a cute
What
movie.
what made you
I
think of
love it.
it in this conversation was
Oh,
like,
because it's about Halloween.
oh, okay, great. Yes, wonderful. I love
Great. People
Halloween.
did a Halloween movie and they go and they see people dressed up as them and they're like, you're terrible. And then they see like this one man dressed up as Kathy the Jimmy, and she's like, we're sexy or we're bitch. It's such a great movie. So if you haven't watched it, it's on Disney Plus, and it's almost 30 years to the
Okay,
day
I'm
when
gonna
this
go
movie
watch it. I didn't know it was on Disney Plus. That's awesome. I'm gonna go watch it.
it
Hey,
was so cute.
question. Can I post a picture of my Maleficent costume on our Instagram story?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You have to now. That's what you gotta do.
Now.
You don't have to ask me. I want to see it.
Okay,
So
great.
I
Yeah.
wanted to end on a
Halloween's
little bit of a
fun.
lighter note, and also understanding
Yeah.
that people they talk about Salem and witches and all of these different things, and
Yeah.
I know that comes across for a lot of different people and what we think about as witches. So I love that they put a little bit of a prequel and
Mm.
a sequel to like why they were cast out and why this thing happened.
Yeah.
But so it's just fanciful in that it's not
Yeah.
hopefully it's not a harmful story for anyone. It's
It's
just a cute thing.
things are more fun when no one's getting hurt. Like, can we just do stuff? Can we just have a good time and like have fun and just not hurt each other? Like,
And
that's
then
way better.
also recognize that something that hurts someone may not hurt someone else, but I
Yeah.
still want to hurt the least amount of people
Hurt the least
and
amount of
engage.
people. That's a great, like, don't be a dick. That's just a good way to
That's
live.
it. Happy Halloween! Don't be a dick.
We could have called this show "Don't Be a Dick."
Exactly.
I think we should do a rebrand.
I am just so happy to have this conversation with you all
Yeah,
and for people to engage and I can't wait to see people's Halloween costumes. Maybe we'll post some non culturally appropriate Halloween costumes
Yeah,
or
there you
whatever.
go.
I'm not gonna dress up, but oh, and I wanted to say this next week because I know we talked about Mel was gone last 2 weeks ago when we our last episode, and we hit our 1 year mark 2 weeks ago, and
Woo!
so but we're ending season two next week.
Mhm.
Wow, it's two
Finale.
seasons. So we've
Mhm.
gone to that's our 20th episode. We've hit a year that we've been doing the show. We'll have two of our producers on, um, talking about decentering heteronormativity and hearing about them and their story just in general as a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, and just meeting our two new producers as well. And we'll do a little bit of celebration for the end of season two, and leave it off with asking you all, like, what are some things that you'd like to see us talk about for season three when we figure out when we'll come back for season three after the holidays, of course, all the holidays that come up. But I'm just so grateful and excited for the people who are here, for you, Mel, and moving this podcast from our thought process to fruition. So I can't wait to celebrate next week with our two producers.
I'm so proud of us. Like, this is a totally grassroots movement. We don't have funding. We're all volunteers. We're all doing this because we're purely passionate about not only the subject matter, but honestly, creating a
Conversation.
community.
Mm-hmm,
A
mm-hmm.
community. Like, this is a community that we're creating. Not just us and the producers, but other people that we get to have these conversations with, and it's such
We're
a
so
joy.
blessed to have so many guests come and talk to us
We're
about this.
amazing.
We're gonna start reminiscing. Let's do it next
Yeah.
week. But it's just
Okay. Okay.
so
Okay.
great people
Yeah.
in the community and keep building, because so a lot of podcasts do a first season and they never do a second because it's a lot of work,
I
it's a lot of
know.
time, and then you're like, oh, that podcast was so good. So we will be back for season three. So,
I
but we'd
heard.
love to hear from you all.
I heard like 90% of some ridiculously high number of podcasts never make it past like 14 episodes or something like
You know
that.
how many podcasts I was listening to? I was like, this is gonna be a good podcast, and
And
then
then
there was never another
I
episode.
know, I know. So go us, yay. So yeah, next week with Joe and Ben, it's gonna be a great conversation, and
No,
we'll
no, no, Darling and Ben.
Darling
Joe
Ben,
was
I'm
at last.
sorry. Joe was already
Joe
last season.
here
That's
too,
right.
yeah, and we probably, and she's, hopefully we'll have her back on, because she is. I love being able to talk to her and get her perspective, even her perspective on blackness and how ours are different, because she is first gen. She immigrated to this country. We talked about white gays before, just so many different things.
That's a
Anyhow,
great the season finale of last week
yeah,
year. Last season, yeah, we decided that we love talking to our producers so much, and they have such wonderful things to say. We're like, why don't we just make it a tradition that our last season
smart.
episode is going to be with the producers because they're awesome. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. Any last words, Tychelle, about the episode?
No, I mean, just go out, have fun, don't be a dick. Like, that's
Oh, be a
that's the new motto for the show. Have fun, don't be a dick. Um,
I have friends who they wanted to make that a family rule in their house, but they have like kids that are like in middle school who are like uncomfortable with saying the word dick, so they changed it to duck. So like, don't be a duck. That's their family motto.
Me and my husband have been talking about working on a handshake, and he's like, "I'm not good at this," and I'm like,
That's
"But I
so
want to learn
cute.
a family handshake, and we got to figure it out before you have kids. I want to learn a family."
A family handshake. Oh my god, that's amazing.
I
Yeah,
like to
I
see
want to
when
see.
TV.
We're gonna post a video of if you want to share a video of that on the Instagram story when you have it. You
We
have it.
want it out that we don't like. I don't want to be weird, and then we go to high five and we miss, and then we just look like bigger dorks. So
No.
we will see you all in
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.